So in this lesson, we're going to look at nested loops and multi-dimensional lists. So let's start by working with a one-dimensional list. So we're going to call this one-dimensional rainbow list. Okay, and we'll use our open bracket and then 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so that's our one-dimensional rainbow list. Okay, let's get our player's position. So position equals world.player, get tile position. And we're going to let x be position.x, y will be position.y, z position.z. Now for each color in our one-dimensional rainbow list, and I'm just going to copy and paste that since it's a lot to type. So for each color in that list, okay, we're going to set a block at the coordinate x, y, z, and we're going to make it wool, which is 35, and then we'll specify the color from our one-dimensional rainbow list. And then let's increment the y value. So y plus equals 1. And if we think about what this is going to do, it's going to take my position, right, in my world, and the first time through, it's going to set a wool block, right, using color 0 at my position. Then the next time it increments y by 1, so the next time it comes through, it's going to put another block on top of the previous block, but using a different color, right? The color will be 1. Then the next time through, y will be incremented, so it's going to be 1 higher, right? And we're going to end up building a tower of wool blocks in these different colors. So let's come over to our world. Right? We can look over, and there's our tower of wool blocks, right? 6 high, because we had 6 elements in our list, and each block is a different color because each element in our one-dimensional list was a different color. Okay. Now, if I wanted to reposition, right, these values, I could change, instead of incrementing y each time, right, I could change my x position each time. So let's try running that. Okay, and now when I come back over to my world, okay, we'll back up a little bit, and we can see now we have, oh, whoa, I think I just fell down. That's funny. Okay, so let's get out of this hole. We'll come back over, and now we can see we have a horizontal row of bricks, right? So we made a vertical one first by changing the y value. Now we have a horizontal row of bricks by changing or incrementing our x value, right? I could change this again in the z direction if I wanted to make another, another row of bricks. So we'll come back over here to our world and plop ourselves down somewhat near where we were before. I think we were, where were we standing? Over here, I think. Oh, now I think I'm on top of a block. Let's back up a little bit. Okay, good enough. So we will stand right here, and then we'll run. And then we'll come get out of the way and take a look at our handiwork. So there's another row of 6 bricks, but this time the change was in the Z position. Okay, so since this is a one-dimensional list, we can only change, right, one dimension at a time. We can't change all of them at once. So let's look, instead of a one-dimensional list, let's think about what we could do if we had a nested list. So if we had a two-dimensional list. So just like with a dictionary, right, after each comma, we could press enter. And that kind of, whoops, let's go back there. That kind of makes it a little easier to see the idea of this being a one-dimensional list, right? We either have straight across as a row, up and down as one column, but there's only one dimension there. If I want to have more than one dimension, I could put a list inside my list. So I could say the first element in my list is 0, 0, 0, right? And then we come down, and the next element in my list is going to be 1, 1, 1, okay, then a comma. And I can just build out my list in this pattern. Right, we'll make the next one 2, 2, 2. And then this one will be 3, 3, 3. And then we'll have 4, 4, 4, comma, and then our last row is going to be 5, 5, 5. Okay, now the open and closed braces here, right, those are brackets rather, those encase the elements in our list. And we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements, just like we had here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements in the one-dimensional list. But what makes this a two-dimensional list is that each of those elements is itself a list, right? So element 1 has 3 elements inside of its sublist, right? Element 2 has 3 elements inside of its sublist, and so on. So now that we have a two-dimensional list, right, let's change our loop now. So for color in two-dimensional rainbow list, okay, now we're going to set our block to XYZ 35 with the color, and let's increment the X by 1, right, inside of the first loop. And now we're going to loop through the other, we're going to loop through the lists inside of the lists. So this outside list, right, is going to look for each element, so each row. So let's go ahead and change color to row. So for each row in the two-dimensional rainbow list. Now let's loop through the color in the row. Okay, so now I'm looping inside of another loop. Okay, so now we'll come down and we're going to go ahead and change those tabs so that we're inside of our interior loop. Okay, now after we, oops, don't want that dash there. After we increment the X, now let's come out to our outside loop and we'll increment the Y. Okay, and let's change our starting position X. So let's have our starting X be equal to X plus 2. I guess we'll just make it equal to X. So we'll make our starting X equal to X. And then when we come to our outer loop, we'll have X equals our starting X. Okay, so let's go ahead and run. And now we'll come over to our world and back up a little bit so we can see what we've made. And we can see here, oops, I just knocked a hole in it. But we can see here from the side, right, we've made a tower now, and it's 3 blocks across and 6 blocks high. Now let's look at where those dimensions came from, right? We've got 6 rows and 3 columns. So for each row, right, that's looping 6 times to get us our 6 in the vertical direction. And then for each color in row, right, that's going to be the columns, and there's 3 of those, so it's going 3 across. Okay, now let's code trace our way through this so we can understand how our program is reading this two-dimensional list. So for row in two-dimensional rainbow list, the first time we come through, right, we're looking at this row. Okay, then it comes down to for color in row, and it's going to grab the color, right, which is 0, 0, 0, and set a block with that wool color, which is white. 0 is white, and it's going to do it changing the X each time. So there's our 0, 1, and 2, right? That's 3 of the white wool side by side for this interior loop. Okay, then it's going to come back up and change the Y value by 1. So now we're up to the next block level. So we're starting on top of the white row. And it's going to change the X back to our starting X. And we need to do that because inside the 4 color in row loop, X ended up incremented to 3 more than our starting X. So in order to get back to where we started, we reassign X to our starting X. And now we loop back up and we're in row 2. Okay, row 2, for each color in that row, we're going to set 3 blocks horizontally because we're increasing the X each time. But this time the color is 1 for each of those 3 blocks, which is orange. Then we increment our Y. That brings us up to the next row on top of the orange. And we change our X back to the starting X so that we can be at the position to build our next row of blocks. And that's going to continue through 3, which is the blue, 4, which is the yellow, and then 5, which is the green. Okay, now when you want to access an element in a two-dimensional list, okay, the row, okay, rows are starting at index 0. So we have row 0, row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, row 5. Columns also start at index 0. So row or column 1, column 2 is index 1, then the third column is index 2. Remember, we always start at 0 with the indices. So let's say I was to put a 7 right here in between my 4s. Okay. Now, if I wanted to change that back to a 4, then I would grab the name of my list, right, two-dimensional rainbow list, and then I'm going to use brackets for the row and the column. Okay, so the row where I put that 7, that row was row 4. So I'm going to be in the 4. And then my column, right, 0, 1, 2, the 7 was placed in column 1. So rainbow list 4, 1. And I'm going to reassign that to be a 4. Okay, so I've accessed this element, row 4, column 1, and I've changed it now from a 7 back to a 4. Okay, so if we come back to our world, and let's jump off this cliff, come down a little bit. Now we can go ahead and run this again. And then we'll come over here and back up, and we can see that the tower has got the right colors in it. right? If I had not changed this 7 back to a 4, in that row we would have a different colored block. So let's go ahead and comment out that line where we fixed it, and we'll run. Oh, actually, before we run, let's come back over to another spot so we don't put the tower one on top of the other. Okay, and then we'll run. Come back over here and go back up, and see in the middle of my wall. Let's come over here so we can see. In the middle of my wall, there's a block that doesn't belong, right? That's my block 7, because I didn't replace the 7 with a 4. We can see the color is messed up in that row, right? If I want it all to be yellow, then I would uncomment and make my two-dimensional rainbow list, right, that element in row 4, column 1 equal to a 4, and that would fix that hole. Okay, now let's say instead of my tower being, excuse me, a rainbow, like we have it now, where I laid out all these values one at a time, let's come up to our top of our program and import the random random library. Okay, so now we can create a list called random numbers, and let's start with just an empty list. Okay, we'll just have an open close brace, so there's nothing currently in the list, but the list has been initialized. So now for the outer values in the range, and let's make the range of those values be 10. So we'll make this go 10 across. Okay, then random numbers dot append, that's going to join a value onto my list. Okay, and then we'll say for inner in range, and let's make that range be 5. Okay, well, maybe we don't even want to make it that big. Let's make this 3 by 2. So it's oh no, we'll make it 5 by 3. So 5 by 3, so it's the same size as the tower that we built last time. Okay, so for inner in range 3, now we'll say number is random dot rand int. So we're going to grab a random integer from 0 to 5. Okay, now random numbers, that's our list outer. We're going to append that number to fill in our inner list. Okay, now let's go ahead and print that list so we can see what our random numbers that were generated were. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and get rid of our list that we made manually. Okay, so let's come back over to our world and find a new place to be. So we'll come over here, and then let's go ahead and run. Oh, whoops, I need to change my two-dimensional list here. So we're renaming our list random numbers, so we're going to need to change two-dimensional rainbow list to be our random numbers list. Okay, we'll come over and take a look here at what we've got, and there's our randomly generated colors for the tower that we made. So if we look down, we can see here's our list, right? Random numbers 033, 114, 445, 522, 401, right? And that filled in our 5 by 3, right, 5 rows, 3 columns tower with those wool colors. Okay, if we run it again, okay, now we'll come back over here and back up so we can see it. Right, here's another randomly generated tower, and you can see in the shell, right, there's the values that were generated randomly that filled in our two-dimensional list to create that effect. Okay, so I've made a new file now called cube.py, and we're going to use a three-dimensional list this time to make ourselves a cube in our Python world. So let's go ahead and define that list, cube, and it's going to be three-dimensional, so I'm going to start with 3 open brackets. And I'm going to make this cube out of diamond, and diamond block is 57. So let's make 4 blocks of diamond, okay, going across. And then let's go ahead and speed this up a little bit. So we'll copy that row of blocks, and then I'm going to make another row. Whoops, got carried away. Let's put that back. So I'm going to make another row now that is a block of diamond on either side, but empty in the middle, right? That's going to be air. Okay, so then we'll copy and paste that, and we'll do that again. And then let's take the one at the beginning that is all diamond the whole way across, okay, and then we're going to close the bracket on that first row. Okay, so in this row, right, this first row here to here, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 lists as 4 elements inside that first row. And then in each of those, we have individual elements. Okay, so hopefully you see the multi-dimensional nature of what we've got here. So let's go ahead and copy that row, and then we'll come down and paste it. And this time, let's put some zeros on the outside. Okay, and then we'll hollow out the middle of our cube. So we'll make these zeros as well on the inside. And then on the end, right, zeros in the middle. Okay, then let's copy that row, and then we'll paste it. Okay, and then let's go back and get our first row. I think I need a bracket for each of those. There we go. And we'll get our first row again, and we'll paste that, and that will be the end of our nested list. Okay, so we're going to need a starting x value like we had last time. We'll assign that to our x position. But now, because we have 3 dimensions to loop through, we're also going to need a starting y position that we can return to when we're looping. Okay, and since we have 3 dimensions in our list, we're going to need 3 for loops in order to traverse this list. So for the depth in cube, okay, then for the height in, and then we're going to reverse the depth, and then for each block in that height, okay, we're going to build a block. So we'll set block at the x, y, z position with the block type that's indicated from our our block value in the list. So either air for 0 or diamond, right, for 57. Okay, and then we're going to increment the x value. So x plus equals 1. Okay, then we're going to come out of that for block in height loop, and we're going to increment our y value. So y plus equals 1. And we're going to return to our starting x. Okay, then we're going to get out of that loop, and now in the for depth in cube loop, we're going to increment the z. So z plus equals 1, and we're going to return the y to the starting y value. Okay, so let's come over to our world and find a new place to be. Okay, this looks like a good spot. And then we'll come over and run module, and then we can back up so we can see what we built. And there's our cube. And let's come over here, we can look at it from another side. Okay, we've got a 3-dimensional cube that we built using our multi-dimensional list.